Okay, then I would love to welcome you all to the first webinar of the small project, the Shared Mobility for All project. This co-creation webinar is something that our partners from the small project have been working very hard on and for a very long time. So we're also happy to finally be able to share with you what we have been working on within the small project and the tools that have been created by our knowledge partners in collaboration with our pilot partners. My name is Azan Kusse. I work for Impact, a Belgian nonprofit organization. And together with Bax, we are leading this very nice project with the very talented partners. Um, this webinar is the first in a series of two. Next week, there will be a second one, a follow-up on this one, where we will actually present you the tools that have been created. But today, we will mainly be focusing on the more theoretical aspect of co-creation, what it is, and how it can be of value of using it and putting it into practice within your mobility projects. Before I get going, I would love to ask you two very quick questions. You should be able to see two questions on your screen. I hope this is the case. We just want to know very quickly how you heard from our webinar and what your profession is. I know we asked it also in your registration, but it would be very nice to also have it here. So if you could answer that very quickly, that would be very nice and helpful for us for the organization of future uh, webinars. I will let that run for a while. And in the meantime, I will also go over very quickly over the agenda of today. We have very, very interesting speakers. I will introduce you to the small project. Maybe you heard of us on LinkedIn or somewhere else at the conference, but we will just give you a very quick intro to what we have been doing and how long we have been doing this actually. And then we will focus or start discussing what co-creation is, discuss co-creation in practice, and discussing some theoretical frameworks, the skills and competences that are needed, and of course also very important experiences from on the field. But I will tell you more later on also about our speakers. But let's first start with co-creation, what it is and who are we. We are a project that is co-funded by Interact North Sea region. We started out in October 22, and the project will run until October 2026. We have 11 pilot sites, of which eight led by cities. And our goal is very simply to co-create more accessible shared mobility solutions. Why we want to do that? Because we see that at this moment, the most shared mobility solutions are mostly designed and made and provided to able-bodied young adults that are mostly living in the big cities. So what we want to do is we want to understand, we want to break this barrier, we want to break this bubble, and make sure that shared mobility is also more accessible for people with reduced mobility. And we want to do this by understanding those groups' needs. What are their needs? And how can shared mobility answer to those needs? We want to test new solutions. I will tell you more about that in the next slide. And based on everything we do regarding co-creation, understanding the needs and testing the solutions, we want to draft new policy guidelines to make sure that outside of the 8 cities that we have within our consortium, that other cities, local authorities can also start co-creating accessible shared mobility solutions. Now, regarding the testing of the shared mobility solutions, our pilots focus mainly on the 3 main characteristics of shared mobility. First of all, the design of it. We want to make sure that besides the regular design or modes of shared mobility services, we want to experiment more with adapted vehicles like wheelchair bicycles, rickshaws, etc., and see how that can be used within a multimodal journey for people with reduced mobility. And then shared mobility without digital solutions is kind of unthinkable, but that doesn't mean that it works for everyone, that digital aspect. So we want to make sure that the digital solutions that are existing, like mass solutions, etc., that they are also more on customized on the needs of people with reduced mobility. And last but not least, a characteristic that is often underestimated and even forgotten, the social aspect of shared mobility, the volunteering aspect, because there are a lot of initiatives over Europe that are led by volunteering organizations. So we also want to experiment with that, co-create together with them, and to see how we can optimize these organizations' needs to make sure that the very valuable services that they provide, that they can also that it also works for them on the longer term sustainable way. And people with reduced mobility, it's quite a buzzword, I think. Like, who do we mean with people with reduced mobility? And often you get this very specific vision of who these people can be. But when you look further, but there is obviously more than meets the eye. And when you think and look further, it's actually everyone of us can be a person with reduced mobility. The moment that you have a child on your hand or groceries, your mobility needs start changing. But that doesn't mean that you don't need any mobility needs. Every one of us need mobility needs, depending on our physical or our mental, emotional abilities and impairments. So this means that people with reduced mobility, it goes beyond the one vision that we have in our minds or the one name that we give to those groups. It's a very, very diverse group. So it's very important to acknowledge that diversity within the diversity too. The main groups that we are focusing on are children and families. When we talk about children's uh, um, routes to schools or hobbies or whatsoever, the main thing is always traffic safety for children or the concerns of parents regarding the safety of their children. When it comes to the elderly, we focus mainly on the risk of social isolation, making sure that they don't fall in the social isolation aspect, that they can still keep on functioning in our society. And for physically impaired people, we want to experiment more with the design of it, how we can make the designs more accessible for them. And then, of course, we talk about people with reduced mobility, and they are often seen as a niche group, but they are far from a niche group. That is actually a very, very big group. And as I said, it can be all of us at any moment. Maybe one important thing for us as a project, we have been doing co-creation. How we have been doing it, we will tell you more about it in the second webinar. But one of the results of the co-creation activities comes from our yearly roundtable event that we organize with industry experts, with local authorities all over Europe, with researchers and end user representatives. And we come together to discuss the challenges regarding inclusive shared mobility. And this time, last week at the Polish conference, we have launched our newest insight paper. So I would say if you can go scan the QR code, go check it out. We will also make sure that you will receive the link in the email after this webinar. And other outputs you can also find on the Shared Mobility for All.eu platform, where we also have our observatory and a policy database, the co-creation toolbox that we will be talking about now in the second webinar. Speaking of the second webinar, it will be next Wednesday at 10 o'clock. And it will be a follow-up on this one. And in this webinar, our partners will really explain our user engagement plan, one of our tools, how you can use it and how our partners have used it, and the challenges that they have experienced. So if you want to really get started with co-creation and with this very specific tool, I would definitely recommend to register there. It's going to be very, like, you will get very tangible and insights. And we will also make sure that we communicate about this in the second after this webinar. And then enough about small and us and me. But let's quickly introduce our very valuable speakers. As I mentioned, we will start the webinar with a more theoretical aspect of what co-creation is and discuss the frameworks. We have Dr. Sarju Singh Rai, He's assistant professor at the VU Amsterdam, and he will be talking about more the Infinity framework regarding co-creation. He will tell you more about it later on. And then we have Elisa Aprazita. She's researcher and lecturer also at the VU Amsterdam. She will explain what co-creation exactly is. And then we have Hussein Zaidan. He is a PhD researcher and lecturer, and he will tell you more about which skills and competences that are actually needed to make sure that your co-creation can be a success. And then, most importantly, we have Christian Zanstra. He works at the housing department of the municipality of Amsterdam, has a lot of experience, on the field experience with co-creation, not only as a local authority expert, but also as an expert by experience. And he will tell us more about how he has experienced co-creation activities in previous projects. So I will give the word first to Elisa, and then we can get started. Yes. Elisa, the floor is yours.
Yes, yeah. Hi, thank you, Isen, and hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here, giving theoretical background on the co-creation and sharing my, whatever I know on co-creation with you all. So maybe you can move to the next slide. So today here I'll talk about what is co-creation, what are the different steps, and why co-creation is important. So as you see, like many scholars, they have defined or given definition of co-creation in different contexts. So in this context, in the public services and goods, they have defined co-creation as the direct involvement of end users who are engaged in different stages like design, production, deployment, and testing. So give you an example of this context would be, let's say, in the bike sharing program. So the designer, like they sort of like the designer company, they share different surveys and to the end users to know about like what sort of bike would they like, what is the accessibility needs. And then in the production phase, the end users would give feedback on those bike, like, okay, in terms of accessibility, this is not good. And then based on that, they would deploy, and then later they would test. So it's regarding the public services and goods. Maybe next slide. And then in terms of the customers and company, here you see Prahlad and Ramaswamy, they have defined it as a collaboration between customers and companies who are actively engaged in order to create this value for the customer so that they can have this positive experience. And again, to give you an example here, in the automotive industry, let's say a BMW car company, so they invite the customers, and then they sort of ask like what sort of design would they like, and based on that they would design their cars, so that at the end the customer would end up having a positive experience. Next one. So this definition is taken from one of the project called Sunrise, which is focused on the sustainable mobility innovations in the European region. And then here they're defined as it's a collaborative process where diverse groups, they come together and then who sort of go beyond this conventional method, for example, like participatory method, or like they don't really follow this hierarchy or any organization structure. But then, they go beyond these methods to address the complex issues. So in a nutshell, like what co-creation is, it's basically, like we all work together. It's about connecting with each other. And then we all feel like, we all are involved. And then moreover, all the stakeholders, their main aim is to have a common goal and then to arrive at a better solution where everyone feels engaged and they have this sense of shared responsibility. So that's the key summary of what co-creation is. So now about different steps. There are different steps like co-identify, co-develop, co-implement, co-evaluate, and co-disseminate. So I'll go through them one by one. So in terms of co-identify, it's not like a linear process that first you have to start with co-identify, but then, in a co-creation, when different stakeholders come together, first you need to identify what is the problem, what are the challenges, and then what is the context that you're working in, and who are the stakeholders that needs to be engaged. So you can start with this. And then the different steps or like co-elements under this would be, first, you can map different stakeholders. So, as Isen mentioned before, like, it could be pregnant mothers, or it could be people with reduced mobility, like people using wheelchairs or visually impaired. So you identify who are your end users, and then in order to reach these end users, who are the stakeholders that you need, right? So you sort of map the stakeholders. And then you can also start with the kickoff meeting, identify like what is your project going to be about, and then you identify what are the common synergies that you all are going to work on. And then what are basically like, what are the different challenges that relates to different target group. And then in doing so, you also build the trust. And then how you build the trust is like you discuss different opportunities and different limitation. So everything is transparent, from this, from very early on. And then in this phase, you also can create a roadmap for your project, and then like how you're going to engage the stakeholders, the timing of the engagement, and the different strategies. So yeah, you can plan this way for the co-identify. And then in co-develop, it's more about like developing the solution. Like every stakeholders, again, you brainstorm together, like what sort of solution you want to develop, to overcome the challenges. And again, different core elements would be like, what are the goals to be achieved? How are you going to achieve that? Who are you going to involve and when? And then it's also very important that you set up a feedback mechanism from early on, just to track like what went well and what sort of areas of improvement you need. And it's very important to also document everything from early on, so that, like, like what are the course of corrections you need to make. So that's one important element. And then as usual, like, when you develop your solution, you share them. So you don't need to wait until end, but then like as you develop, you can share with your stakeholders, with the target group, like this is what we've been doing. So that's the co-develop. Next one. Yes, and please. And then in terms of co-implement, so this is again about implementation of different measures and solutions that you have developed in the co-development phase. So this you do by, involving stakeholders from the city representatives and the citizen themselves. And different elements under here is, again, in order to implement the strategies, the solution that you have developed, you need to have this detailed implementation plan. And that detailed implementation plan would be, okay, what are the major activity, the sub-activity, what is the timeline that you're going to execute these implementation. And then you also want to be aware of, like what is the in terms of roles and responsibility, like who's going to, is the power balanced or not? Like does anybody has like a strong voice? Like everything needs to be balanced in terms of implementation also. And then prior implementation, you also need to check like whether everyone is on the same page or not, whether you have consensus from the participants, like, whether, let's say, the elderly or the people from wheelchair, like using wheelchair, like, are they satisfied or comfortable with the solution that you are presenting? So you need to have this consensus from all your end users, from your stakeholders. And then one very important step is also to have this iterative mechanism. That is like, if there is any disagreement, there is a room for you to go back and make the necessary course of correction. Then again, you identify the challenges, so it's like, again, you can go back and forth with co-creation, different steps. Yes, so next, please, Lisanne. And then after this, there's a co-evaluate. So this is again like assessing the impact of the solutions and the processes, throughout the co-creation stages. So this you can do by co-monitoring, which is again like throughout the process, because monitoring is ongoing. So you observe the impacts, the processes throughout the co-creation phases, through forms, through online polls or tools, and then you can make the corrections like as and when needed. And then you also can do assessment, which is again, you can collect the data through quantitative like survey or a questionnaire, and then through qualitative, like you can do focus group or, different interviews. And then it can feed on to your monitoring data, which can again help you with the learning, gather the learning progresses. And then the evaluation is more about like you sort of evaluate your impact, you want to know like how, how did your solution impact the end users, or like what did the operators, the designer thought about the solution. So you do this pretty much at the end. And then you also identify like what is the benefit and is there any needs of any improvement or not. Next slide, please. And then the co-disseminate. So this is, again, it's, like together you share like whatever you've been doing, all the good work, the success stories, the failure, the solutions, everything, like you do it within the team and then you disseminate to the larger audience. So for this also, you can again bring in the co-identify steps in order to, map your stakeholders. Like, okay, who are you going to present this solution? Who is your intended audience? Are your roles clear or not in terms of disseminating? So for instance, like who is going to create a communication plan, who is going to reach out to which stakeholders. So these roles, the facilitation role, everything also should be clearly defined from beginning. And then, yes, you also need to identify the appropriate communication platform. Like, is it going to be through online, or is it going to be, in a face-to-face meeting? So how are you going to share your solutions, or like whatever you have, developed throughout the co-creation phase? So that needs to be clear. And then, like, if you want to invite speakers on the same theme, you also need to be aware about like who are these relevant speakers, and then you contact them from from early on, like book their time, and then so disseminate your outcomes to a larger audience. So that's for the co-creation steps. And now, like, why we need co-creation. So one is like, as you have already heard, that it's a very inclusive approach, like everyone comes together and brainstorm together to address the shared concern. So it's very inclusive approach. And then the next one would be, yeah, it ends up establishing a strong ties with local networks. So just to give you an example from one of the pilot project from Small, like Fits a Taxi. So they have this volunteering scheme. So where they use where the volunteers, they provide the cargo services to elderly people. So there, even the volunteers, they end up having this small talk with the elderly people where they feel connection with the, they are socializing. So what Essen said before about the social aspect. So you're also creating the social bond, through these co-creation approaches. So it helps with the strong ties. And also, like, everybody will have a holistic understanding of the context, because everyone is involved and everybody is stepping on each other's shoes and trying to feel what are the problem each one is going through. So and also it creates this social legitimacy. So sort of like it builds the trust, because you're transparent with your challenges and opportunities. So it also helps in building trust. Next slide, please. And then also, so co-creation is not necessarily the top-down or bottom-up approach. It's rather a multi-directional approach. So what I mean by this is it's not really like only the leader should dictate this role, or like it's only driven by the the problem from the community level, but it's multi-directional. Like anybody can step in any time, and then can like all the voices are also heard, and so it's quite multi-directional. So it's very good. And at the end, it's to summarize it, it's a active involvement where the co-creation focuses on, you're focusing on building a sustainable solution. You're focusing on empowering each other, like empowering the end users, the operators with their designs, and also, like I said earlier, about trust building. Everything is transparent, and you can trust whoever stakeholders are involved, because you have this sense of shared responsibility, because okay, this challenge is mine, and then all the stakeholders are going to mitigate the challenges. So it's a shared responsibility. So that's why co-creation. Yeah, and with this, I'm done. If you have any question, you can please feel free to add in the chat or ask later. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Elisa, very much for this very nice and broad introduction to co-creation. And as I said earlier on, it's obviously more than what meets the eye. There's more going on. And it's more than just a buzzword. And indeed, thank you also for reminding our participants if you have a question, please put it in the chat. We will also have a Q&A session in the last 15 minutes of this webinar. So Any questions we have, please put them in the chat or wait for it for the full Q&A session. Thank you again, Elisa. And let's go towards the more practical framework of what we call co-creation, Sarju. The floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Essen, and thank you very much, Elisa. So I'm just going to build up on what Elisa just talked about. So Elisa showed the different steps of co-creation, which was quite important. So having worked in co-creation, both from the academia, where like we look into the theories of co-creation, in academia, we are a little bit more idealistic and more aspirational in regards to co-creation. But then when we actually work in projects, for example, in innovation projects, then we always see that sometimes some of these things don't really actually fit that well. And there are a lot of challenges that come in actually conducting or doing co-creation in real life, right? So for that, I actually wanted to ask the participants, how many of you are actually involved in an innovation process? Maybe you're professionals, you are actually working in NGOs or projects, and are engaged in innovation. So if you can just react quickly, if you have any experience in co-creation or innovation processes.
They can write it in the chat, I guess.
You can also write it in the chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so while you do that, I will also go into this, right? So the main intention for me to actually show this particular framework of co-creation is that we want to connect the theory and the practice together. So you can see this infinity loop framework of co-creation, which basically not only shows how co-creation happens in real life, but it also shows us what are some of the practical considerations that can be actually put into the practice of co-creation as such. So here you can actually see two different planes. Thank you very much, Luke. So it seems like you are in projects of community shared practices, which is definitely like related to co-creation as such. Nice to know that. So if you look into this particular loop, like you can see a very beautiful infinity, you will see two different planes. The first horizontal plane, basically, it shows the spectrum of when an innovation starts. It starts with ideation. It starts with like bringing beautiful ideas, looking into problems, just like what Elisa said. And then it goes slowly towards materialization of these ideas in the form of implementation, etc. And in the vertical axis or the vertical plane, you can actually see the stakeholders, right? So on top, you can see broader stakeholders. And it is a spectrum. And as you go below, then you can see the core project or innovation team. So what it actually shows is that co-creation is not a very linear process, and it is not just a singular process as such, right? So co-creation doesn't really mean that all the people and all of the stakeholders need to be engaged all the time in every step of the way. It basically means that you will have to decide on when to bring different stakeholders at different points of time, right? And you can see this quadrant, which is divided into 4 different stages. The first stage on your left, you can see the exploration stage. The second stage on above is the commitment stage, then the design stage and the realization stage. So this basically shows a continuous loop of how innovation works and where more and more stakeholders are involved and where lesser stakeholders can also be involved, right? So co-creation is definitely a very dynamic and a very flexible process where we need to actually decide based on the projects, like how we actually conduct it. So if we can go to another slide, then we can actually place what Elisa just talked about, the different steps of co-creation into this infinity loop framework, and you can actually see this, right? So if you look into the co-identify phase, which is on your left, you can actually see that co-identify phase can actually start with just your project team. So maybe your project has a brilliant idea, and then you want to actually use that idea to actually build on it, right? So you will first start with your own project team, but then you will slowly involve more end users, more stakeholders as such to gain more commitment. And slowly then you go into the development stage where sometimes you are alone in development, right? So for example, maybe you are a very technical organization, or like you are an engineer organization where sometimes you are a little bit more focused on your own practices, right? Here, like maybe you will not benefit from getting more stakeholders involved, right? So you have to see like where you involve stakeholders at what point. But then once you develop something and you want to actually implement it, you need more user inputs. And there you will go to a stage of realization where you will engage more stakeholders as such to actually see what you have developed actually works and whether it is actually relevant in your context. And then you can actually go into the loop where you are co-evaluating and co-disseminating. So here, what is important for us to understand is that these different co-stages or different stages are not all equally divided, right? So co-identify stage should not be equal in regards to timeline as co-development stage. So depending on your projects, these stages will be different. So here, like we have put together co-evaluation and co-dissemination, and these projects are basically focused, these stages are focused on learning, right? So once you implement it, you learn a lot, whether it works or not. What are the flaws, right? So what are some of the new designs or new changes that are needed? And then you go back into the loop to actually then co-identify these problems, but at the same time, offer new solutions for design, and then you go through the infinity loop stages over and over again, right? So the infinity loop in itself in innovation is a continuous loop, or it's a continuous process, right? So usually it doesn't really stop if your organization is going and if your organization is continuously innovating. For example, in regards to technological innovations, we can talk about iPhone, right? iPhone is continuously innovating. New and new iPhones are always coming. So this infinity loop always keeps on going, right? So if you can go to the next slide. So another important thing that this is also came out in our own project where there are many different project partners and we all have different stages where we start from, right? So we all have different starting points. So let's say in this stage, we have a project one, which starts from the perfect stage one of exploration where like we are co-identifying. Can we show the next slide? Yeah. So very rarely we sometimes come up with these projects which actually starts from all the way from the beginning, right? So let's say like in this case, it starts from the stage one, the exploration, where you started co-identification, then you go to the co-development process, then you go through the co-implementation project, and then the stage, and then the co-evaluation and co-dissemination aspect, right? So you actually see that in this lucky project, it starts from the very beginning. And in such a project, it's very easy to also see where people can be involved, where you can get inputs from the end users, and where you can actually co-create more and more to kind of like really put value and meaning to the innovations that you add. But we also see another scenario where your project starts from a different segment, right? So let's say you already have, as an organization, created a new innovation, right? So a new shared mobility innovation. And you start from there, like where you are already in a design stage, right? So you have already skipped the other stages. So can you still do co-creation? That is a very common question that we always get. And the answer is true, because innovation process is an infinity loop, which means that you will have ample opportunities to co-create in different stages as you go through these loops, right? So in case of the project two, which have started from the design process, if you look into it, you can actually co-implement it, and then you can engage stakeholders to actually look into whether the innovation that you have created on your own actually makes sense to the society, right? And then from there you learn, and then you actually put in maybe more design elements into it. You co-identify together with the societal stakeholders, and then you co-develop this solution again, right? So you are constantly innovating and constantly adding more and more inputs into this process. So the main takeaway from this particular Infinity framework is that co-creation is very, very flexible and adaptable. And I hope this is going to provide inspiration to everybody to co-create further, right? And to use this concept of infinity loop for constant innovation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergio. I think it's very interesting to see the infinity loop, because I mean, at least when I first heard about co-creation, it was mainly about, okay, I first have to start with co-identification and then going with steps. But indeed, depending on where you are standing within your project or with your service that you want to test out or make more accessible through co-creation, you can really kind of play with it. And I saw that this was also a concern within our small pilot, saying like, oh my God, wait, but some people are already co-implementing, but I still need to do co-identification. But it really depends on where you are at, how mature your service already is to decide which phase or which step co-creation step you want to start with. So it's very interesting how you have visualized it. Thank you very much for that. And let's go to our next speaker who will tell us what it takes to do co-creation regarding skills. Hussein, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Yes, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you, everyone. I think I will start by you telling us what is needed.
We let the participants work here.
Yeah, we're gonna let you. Don't think we don't have the answer. We might have an answer, but let's do it more interactively. So you have the code, the QR code on the screen. Now, when we talk about competency, we consider competency being three parts: knowledge, skill, and attitude. Some people will add behavior/attitude. But keep that in mind when you're answering the first question. So I want you, please, to kind of like, let's take a moment to reflect individually, like on yourself. What specific knowledge, skill, and attitude do you personally rely on when engaging in spaces that are kind of co-creative/collaborative spaces? So I would like you to submit at least, or I think it's limited to 3 words, three words in the Mentimeter. Can we have the other page?
Yes, yes. Elisa, I'll stop sharing so you can share your screen.
Waiting for the presenter.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you need to do present.
Start the presentation, yeah.
So what do you recognize that you're relying on or consider essential competency that you depend on when you're doing co-creation? No responses.
Did everyone manage to get in? Okay.
Organization.
Yeah.
Organization, trust. Rephrasing, listening, summarizing. Thinking out of the box. Okay, beautiful. Listening is getting bigger. So we're 16. If we're gonna deduct ourselves, yeah, I think there is. Let's give one more moment for the rest to submit. 24 response. Okay. Okay. Next, let's shift our perspective a little bit. Now, each of us has their own biases regarding what we value in other during those collaboration. So think about what kind of knowledge, skill, attitude, or even behavior you particularly appreciate in your fellow collaborator. Ooh. I will check later on, but I don't think I read patient in the previous response. So we want the other people to be patient with us.
I think I saw one patient in the previous slide, patients.
Okay. Empathy and listening are coming again. Okay, so we can go back if they are full now, I think. We can go back to the slides.
Yes, I'll share my screen again.
Thank you.
You see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so when we talk about competency, we often focus on the individual level. What skills, knowledge, and attitude are needed to equip individual to contribute effectively to these processes. But to truly be able to define these competencies, we need to consider the processes themselves. And we saw now kind of like two different framing, if I can call them, the one that Lisa presented and the one Sarju. And if we do like a very quick Google search, it will show like countless procedure and framework and approach of co-creation, each of them like emphasizing a different element of co-creation. While they might be framed slightly differently, they all aim to move beyond what they are calling traditional model of collaborating and trying to kind of like this model, they define it as a small group of experts working in isolation or whatever they kind of like see or critique that traditional model. Then they want to move to a more collaborative with a wide range and groups in society or communities. So we saw, as Elisa introduced us to a co-creation framework with these sub-elements. This framework helped define stages or phases of the processes. Within those stages, we see that there will be different tasks, and those different tasks will be assigned or they will be translated into roles that people will be assigned to do. So here where we kind of like can start extracting those competencies. So for instance, maybe the next slide, please. So for instance, if we're looking at the first, let's not call it the first because we're coming back to Sarju's infinity loop. For instance, if we look at this co-element of co-identification of the problem, what can be a competency that is needed? Now we see there is in the corner mapping stakeholder. So here I expect, let's say, we will be needing a type of system thinking or a level of system thinking, which is a knowledge / skill to have it. At the same time, in this phase, we have to identify synergy or building trust. Which is an interaction between the partner, the stakeholder. This might benefit a little bit from open-mindedness, flexibility, humility. If we go next slide, we will see again the infinity loop, which highlight the iterative nature of co-creation and how we're going back and forth to tackle the complexity of societal problems. To me, this is why I added the two graphs underneath it. When I saw the infinity loop, like it reminded me design thinking / responsible research and innovation. I know now we're starting to get like a little bit overwhelmed with how many ways we can do co-creation. But at the same time, we can start seeing the different framing and how those different framing will have different sub-mix of competency under each of the phases. And this is how competency, we see them reorganizing themselves and reprioritizing themselves under each of the phases. And now I think as my time will be almost running out, I would like to leave you with two considerable sources that we look at competency. One is the academic one. It's the next slide. Yeah, so this is the work of Redman and Wick. They did something in 2011, and then they re-updated it in 2021. They are focusing on competencies that are needed in sustainable project and sustainable research. So they recategorize them with a lot of like transformative skills and stuff like that. It's a little bit like too much. It's designed to be maybe mostly research and innovation or project that are extracted from those researches. It's a very good source to look at how they are defining those competency and what kind of like descriptor, as they call it. Then the second list of source will be something a little bit more tangible or more practical. These sources are very nice sources. Why I like these sources is because there is like kind of like a definition under the competency. Because most of the time when we talk about competency, we feel like people are saying active listening, with, for example, without defining what's active listening, or conflict resolution, as if the word itself will have the full description of what this word entails. So I think we can share those links with you. And then the whole idea is that however you're designing your process of co-creation, you can see what are the roles and what are the needed competency within these phases. That's it from my side.
Thank you so much, Hussein. It's really also interesting to see, like, it's not just one, like it's an infinity process, co-creation, but it's also not something that only one person can do. You need so many skills, so many competences. It would be amazing if we had one individual with that many skills and that many competences. But it also gives like this reality check of how big of a time and resources that co-creation actually needs. That it's not just a one-shot moment, but it's an entire trajectory that you go along with a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders. So it's really a reality check of how big it is. Again,
Exactly.
regarding this.
I think this is what's overwhelming when you see those list of competency, because it feels like it's a sub or like a kind of like a superhero that we're designing here that will have all those skills, and we're not realizing that those are different roles. The person can move between 2-3 roles in the different phases, but there is somebody else that is part of these projects. So how are we kind of like what's the synergy between those competencies? And sometimes if you read those list of competencies, there is trade-off. There is something that you can't be so flexible and so assertive at the same time. What are you doing? It depends on the phase also. So these we need to kind of like do what you're saying. It's like kind of a reality check. Where are we and what is appreciated for this phase?
Very nice answer. And I love the way you named it as like we're not all superheroes. And speaking of superheroes, let's go to one of them, Christian. I think this is the best introduction you will ever have. Christian, you will tell us more about your experiences with co-creation as not only an organizer, but also an expert by experience. You are working at the Gemeente Amsterdam, the municipality of Amsterdam, the housing department, but you have also very much a lot of experience in at the Vervoerregio Amsterdam, if I remember. I will let you introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon, all of you. First, a little bit about myself. I've got a design background by education. As you see in the picture, I'm in a wheelchair. I've got lived experience with inaccessibility. There, I'm exploring the world. I'm in a First World War bunker in Belgium. And for me, this with a very low ceiling, it's very it's accessible. But for all of you, walking, you will have difficulties. Me traveling through Europe, I often choose to stay on the ground and choose for trains and ferries. In that way, I've got a broad experience with different mobility systems elsewhere. Yeah, and I've got a local, national, international network in accessibility improvement. And last but not least, vision and ideas for change. And that I'm also using in co-creation. A little bit about my work background. I work, as you said, for the municipality of Amsterdam at the housing department. I've worked for the vervoerregio until last year. From the housing department, I'm actually also since last year ambassador for accessibility improvement for the whole physical domain. So all the things the city does physically, and that's besides housing, that's public space, mobility, spatial planning, real estate, heritage. And indeed, the collaboration with the FU started in 2018. We established a knowledge alliance in 2021, of which you see a print screen on the right. And that print screen is from openresearch.amsterdam. That's also a co-creation between the municipality, regional partners, and knowledge institutes in creating knowledge. And we, in the last years, have created knowledge for accessibility and inclusion. And actually, this also established the connection between Amsterdam and the small consortium, because Bax, one of the other partners, discovered a report about inclusive, shared, and micro-mobility on open research, of which I was the commissioner, and they contacted me, and then the municipality, vervoerregio, and Vrije Universiteit were connected. Next slide. Indeed, my ambassadorship, a little bit more about that. That consists of putting the value of accessibility on the agenda, research about which I just shared, using that research for standardization. So what is accessibility, and describing that. Then indeed also awareness building is asked, so that people, colleagues, and other partners become more aware of what it means to be either mentally or physically diverse. And accessibility is still a lot of work, and that work also needs to be created and needs to be thought about, and that's something I take a role in. And with that, also networking, collaboration, presentation, and lobbying is asked, and that's also an element of my ambassadorship. Next slide. Yes, a little bit about the collaboration with the FU. Since 2018, I've delivered different research questions, which the FU connected to groups of students that were looking for assignments for their education. And for them, it's of added value to learn from practice and to use that for their future professional lives. Is there more? In the meantime, you can check on that open research link. There are more than 20 reports about different issues related to different research questions. And in the different research processes, also different stakeholders are involved. So we're talking about, for example, Cliëntenbelang Amsterdam, which is an interest group. And there are about 15 different either user or interest groups which can take part in this. Next slide. Yeah, indeed, this is a nice example. One of the elements I shared was building awareness of mental and physical diversity. For this, a serious game is in development, and this game consists of different elements, and 3 of those elements we are testing now. It will be used in 6 different life domains, from housing to education, working, free time spending, care, and mobility, connecting it all. But we're going to start with mobility and housing. The places I work and have worked. Aim of the game is to make the colleagues as players more aware and give them a better feeling about what it means to be, for example, blind, or be autistic, or be in a wheelchair like me, and what that means for their work. And yeah, I believe that's kind of it. Yeah, I can share a little bit more about the can we go back? You see a few pictures, but that's not really clear. But the 3 first elements, we're going with a group. The first level of the game is a counting exercise, which means on a route through the city, looking around and checking what diversity is present, and that's diversity you can see, like wheelchair users, people walking with a guide dog, or with a white cane, or those mobility aids. Level 2 is pub quiz like, so that's asking quiz questions about mental and physical diversity, accessibility, and about legislation and innovations, and all kinds of stuff related to improving the participation of mental and physical diversity. And level 3 is expedition, which means, for example, putting players in a wheelchair or blindfolding them, and letting them experience, guided by experienced experts, the environments related to their work, so the mobility environment or the housing environment, and in that way giving them knowledge about what it means if you meet barriers. So let's go to the next one. Yeah, looking back onto to summarize the important elements, in my opinion, for co-creation, that's putting experienced experts like me in positions like me, so they are able to put changes on the agenda. Creating knowledge in co-creation, like we do with the FU and with students, and with the different interest and user organizations. And then looking back on the game, use it in a playful way to establish the change. Now I'm reading. Yeah, indeed, that's also a very important thing. The co-creation has also helped by connecting the different partners and giving them a role to convince the stakeholders in the process to continue and to yeah, really make the change happen. And that's also because you can't leave other partners behind, and you can't stop or quit the process if many different partners are involved. And co-creation is also very democratic thing to do. So that's in my opinion a very good reason to start immediately. Let's see what's left. Oh yeah, a bit of future. We in the meantime have established a collaboration with besides with the VU, with the UvA, the University of Amsterdam, the University of Groningen, the UMC is the Medical Center of the University of Utrecht, the TU Delft, the Hanse University for Research in Accessibility, and with the VU research is in collaboration at the. If you check the open research link, you see that there you find different reports, and that's still a bit difficult to find the information you need, and to make it easier, and to also give the user experts and students a bigger role in creating knowledge. We are trying to find out if we can create a kind of Wikipedia style way to create knowledge, and that's easy and navigatable by, for example, colleagues who have become more interested and more curious to know more about accessibility, and that on open research. If yeah, so I like to invite everyone with these opportunities to play together. In a sense, is welcome to contact me and to check out together if we can co-create and work together. And I believe that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christian. I think it's definitely people for our participants that they should contact you, just because not only your experience but also the gamification aspect is very, very interesting. Maybe a quick question from my side before we enter the Q&A. If for the participants, if you have any questions, please write them in the chat. We have time to respond to them. Maybe I can. These are the references. Yeah. Christian, maybe a quick question from my side to you. Within the small project, we have this concept called the participation sandbox, and it says that like co-creation, of course, is very important and it should be done, but there is also this reality of that you cannot co-create everything with everyone. And we are wondering, like, or I am wondering if you have, within your practical experience, encountered a situation where you were like, okay, we want to do co-creation, but we have to decide what can be included in the sandbox, just to stay in your gamification wording too. And do you have an example where you had that scenario where you had to decide on what was negotiable and what was non-negotiable when you did co-creation?
Yeah, very often it's a matter of having patience, because you can't do everything at the same time, or reach everything. So you need to choose what are we going to do first, and then what's going to follow. But that's, yeah, if you continue and keep in mind that things can follow, then in my opinion it can go fine.
Okay, thank you. I see that we already have one question by Eva, and she's asking, and I think this is a question that is also often mentioned when we talk about co-creation, the challenges of actually engaging people, engaging citizens to participate in a co-creation trajectory, because it is, like I said before, more than just a one-shot moment. How do you have any advices? Maybe this is an open question to all of you. also from the theoretical framework, maybe regarding also the skills and the competences, how we can make sure that people can actually don't only participate, but also remain engaged throughout the trajectory.
Maybe I can start and then the others can join in as such. So thank you very much, Eva, like, because this is a very important question, and definitely like whenever we are doing or dealing with co-creation, this always happens, right? Because sometimes it also depends on the issue that you're co-creating on. Sometimes some of these issues are very much in line with the interests of the society, something that is really, really embedded within what society is facing. So you will see that if it is a very, very urgent issue, a lot of people are interested as such, right? Many of these issues sometimes can be quite political in that sense as well. So a lot of people are interested as such. And there are certain, definitely like certain niche innovations as such, which are very, very new, that many people do not actually understand its value yet. And that is where like we have a difficulty of like really engaging people. But then usually in our experiences, when it comes to co-creation, we try to go to different citizens groups or different civil society organizations or different like different formations, different communities and different collectives, which may somehow have a stake or interest in this particular innovation as such, right? So it is very important that we find these key personnel. Sometimes we also call them champions, or sometimes these are also these representative groups, and try to engage them and try to get and leverage their connections and network as such. So sometimes that helps. But then again, like co-creation is also about finding the right people, and then the right connections and the right networks and leveraging their connection and networks through and through. And I think that for that, you need certain competencies as well, which maybe Hussein can then connect to.
Yeah, I think the question is a very good question, because I think we talk sometime about the participation fatigue also. And if I will go beyond the idea of participation fatigue and look at what it take people to or what sometimes we observe in the people that are interested and putting some time and effort to kind of like participate, it can be connected to a sense of purpose. These people are inherently motivated themselves, and even just out of co-creation field and looking at the students, sometimes you see the difference between students that have this sense, how they are keen and motivated, from people that are like, okay, can I do the bare minimum? It's a problem. But now with also the intensity sometime of, let's say, project that are reaching out to specific communities, there is this fatigue, because maybe sometimes we're not seeing the relevancy. So showing the relevancy of the work, how this work will come back to them, what's the reciprocity here, can engage people more. Also the formulation or the framing of the problem in a way that is tangible for those communities, because sometimes we have our own framing of what we consider problematic that they don't share with us. So also bringing that on board can help out. I think also Christian can lean on that a little bit.
Motivation, in my opinion, is, I think, the last thing I said. Co-creation is democratic, and if we look around in the world, we need new forms of democracy. We need more, I think, participation and participative democracy, and that's something you can establish, create by co-creation. But then the motivation, yeah, but hopefully the motivation will yeah, will
come through.
yeah, okay, indeed will come through, and will be there.
Maybe I just
Thank
want
you.
to add on to what Hussein and Christian said about like motivation and sense of purpose, and also try to relate with the comments that we got in our last partners meeting. So it's also in order to motivate people, like it really depends on what sort of co-creation method we are also following. So the most highlighted method was the storytelling and visualization. So because that sort of method also really, appeals the participants, appeals the stakeholders, like, it generates a story. So that really hits on your heart, like, it hits the core, and it creates more sense of empathy. So I think with that also, like, it motivates people to participate in such events. So it depends, like, whether you have that skill, like storytelling skill, and the way you visualize your problem. So that is also quite important, I guess.
Thank you. I hope this was an answer for Eva's question. And I will go to Sami's question about the timing of co-creation. This is actually very interesting that a lot of projects can spend a lot of time on co-creation. And sometimes it can feel like co-creation can be used as an excuse to, keep on gathering knowledge and delaying the experiment, the pilot site itself. How do you feel about that? When do you think that co-creation should stop or should be finalized, or co-creation phase? That's the question. Maybe Sergio with your oh yeah, go ahead, Christian.
Just to make the issue clear, the question is, how do we stop co-creating in eternity without results?
Yes, I think that's the question that Sami was aiming at.
Yeah, I think in that process that you need people indeed to push things and to really indeed good twist. You really need some people to push things and to really establish the change, because indeed the change is needed, and indeed that's also what I see happening, that co-creation can also be used to delay things.
Is that then related to the fact that, in my opinion, a lot of mobility aspects or solutions are often very much like top-down regulated, and often co-creation can be seen as in, oh, it's too much time. Let's just do it as quickly as possible, because the entire mobility system is based on efficiency and smoothness, and everything needs to go seamless and very quick. So that can also be the other side of, not the other side, but also another challenge, that the eager to do things top down rather than bottom up can take over, especially when, because of the co-creation phases or the co-creation trajectory can take such a long time.
I feel sometimes maybe the issue is in us sometimes, because we kind of keep, let's say, reading about different type of co-creation, and sometimes we're kind of like bashing ourselves and our project. I noticed that in some couple of co-creative action, let's say the partner that we're doing already, and then they keep asking, how can we co-create? And you're like, what are you gonna co-create more? You already talked to every single community. There is nothing beyond that. Just move on. And then if something came up that need this iteration, we will see how it will be included. But I think because people around us, consultancy firm, us included, academia, keep kind of like talking about how can we bring another layer of transdisciplinarity, co-creation, collaboration, that we're sometimes going into those loop and delaying ourselves, while it's like, okay, let's move on with that. Next step will show us if we're testing something and it didn't work, we're gonna come back naturally, like to the phase before it. So and this is what I was looking at when we're talking about competency, because you're going to get so overwhelmed with how many different framework are out there that you're like, is that framework the best fit to my type of project? Let's try it. then if it didn't work, we can add this element, or we can remove the element that is not applicable to our work, and kind of like run with our next steps. Yeah.
So I think it's also indeed very, very important to look at ourselves and be critical on the little voice in our heads, like, okay, what can we do more? Who can we involve more? And it's also about like just kind of feeling it, like maybe a bit more intuitive thinking and knowing like, okay, you are kind of ending a certain phase, time to involve the people, the stakeholders that will be relevant for the next phase. Make sure that they can actually help you to go to the next phase, because you don't have to do this alone. It's this entire collaborative thing going on in the co-creation trajectories. I see Sami's reaction. I guess it's also realizing you won't learn and know everything during your first co-creation phase. It's iterative, as you said. Yeah, that's true. Any other questions or last words from our speakers? Things that you want to give to our participants before we close up? Maybe a question from my side of saying, like, what do you think is the one thing that could make co-creation, according to you, successful? From your perspective, all of you.
From all of our perspective. So maybe I can start and then the others can join in as such. So in my case, like throughout the whole webinar, I think what we actually really pressed on is what Eliza and Christian and Hussein have been also talking about, is co-creation in itself is a democratic process, but at the same time, it is a flexible process, right? So sometimes we think too much about it, and that's why we're stuck, just like the question we had before. But then if you look into the infinity loop and the framework of it, the whole process is co-creation, right? So the whole innovation process involves co-creation in different stages. It is definitely then inherent value. Co-creation is an inherent value that you take with you, rather than a moment where you bring all of the people together and then you discuss ideas, right? So I would suggest everybody to take co-creation as an inherent value, which is really, really important aspect of the innovation process. And without that, the innovation process doesn't really go along, right? So that is my suggestion to everybody, to actually look into co-creation as rather than like being overwhelmed by it.
Thank you, Sergio. Maybe Christian?
All right. The question once again, clear.
Yeah, just the one thing from your perspective that you think could make co-creation successful. If you had to choose one thing, because I know there are a lot of aspects, of course.
Yeah, I already talked about democracy. I think I just saw storytelling. In my opinion, life is about stories and about community. So doing things together. And I think co-creation is just that. So it's just a matter of life.
Wow, that's a good one. Thank you, Christian. Elisa?
Yeah, just adding on to what Christian said, like it's it's more about like sense of shared responsibility and feeling the sense of accountability, and not feeling like, okay, this is, not feeling, okay, this is only my job and only my task, but then, having the shared responsibility. So that's what really hit me about co-creation, like, and empathy and it again, like for every step, like if you see even for, let's say for co-dissemination, there also you see co-identification, co-evaluation. So for all these steps, there are these sub-steps, embedded. So it's not like Sergio mentioned, it's not this, how do you say, like this ladder step, but it's more like a loop, so you can come in and come out, you can integrate all of the steps. So yeah, just not get overwhelmed by the frameworks, what Hussein mentioned. Just feel the sense of shared responsibility. Yeah.
Thank you. Hussein, last words from your side?
I think it is all covered. Yeah. I think it's this sense of like, yeah, what are we here to do? And just be open to hear other people's perspective. And this is already a very good step of succeeding in co-creating.
Okay, thank you all very much for the speakers, all of you. I think co-creation is something more than a buzzword, and I think we have proven that in this webinar. And thank you for all of your work in the small project and your involvement and contributions. and also, of course, to the participants for listening to our valuable speakers. I will make sure that the insights or the recording and the presentation are shared through email afterwards. And don't forget to register for our next webinar next week, Monday. Thank you very much, and see you later. Bye.
Thank you, Sen. Bye.
Bye
all.
bye.
Thank you.